Let's get right into it. First question I'm going to ask for all three panelists. Are you building rentals today? Where? And what other markets are you looking into? So Paul, start with you.
Thanks, Alan. Paul Zemla, CIO with Bentall Kennedy. So just 2 seconds of a quick background. Asset manager and property manager. So we're Canada's largest asset management firm and its largest property management firm. I started there about 15 years ago. We had 700 million under management, and we're about 31 billion now. So pretty decent growth over the last 15 years, lots of corporate acquisitions in that. We moved into the US in 2006, and in our US operation, we're far more active in multifamily. All told, we have about 13,000 multifamily units, about 60% of those in the US. 24 months ago, we bought 2,000 brand new units in various cities, and then about 12 or 18 months ago, we switched to development, and so we currently have about 2,000 units, high-rise concrete, downtown buildings in the US under construction. Seattle, San Francisco, LA, Chicago, New York, Minneapolis, and I think Houston or Austin. Houston, I think. So yeah, very active in the US. Some pretty specific reasons why in the US that makes sense. You went from 63% of home ownership to 69% home ownership to the 2008 meltdown, and they're on their way back down to 64, 65% home ownership. It's created a ton of renters. In Canada, we are not literally under construction on multifamily, but we have several that we're about to pull the trigger on in Calgary. We agree with the previous presenter that Calgary provides a pretty good opportunity. So in the Beltline, we have several sites that we're about to go under construction there in a phased approach. They're not all going to come on at the same time. Looking hard at a couple of deals in Toronto that are under contract, so we'll see if that makes sense. Would really like to do Vancouver, but at 100 a buildable being the deal on land when it doesn't work for condo anymore, that's still a long way from what works in rental. I guess we would look at Edmonton and Ottawa as well. We're actually actively looking at something in Ottawa right now.
Okay, good, thank you. Brian.
Thanks. Just to correct a little bit on the billing, it bills me as an architect, which I am, but we basically practice construction as one of our primary focuses in business, and basically integrate the design and construction process, because we don't happen to believe that design and construction are two separate processes, but that they're one. So we tend to move away from the adversarial approach to design and construction into a more collaborative approach. Now, the answer to the question is pretty short, no. Not in Canada, but in our Phoenix office, we currently have one project on the go, and we have 3 proposals in right now, but nothing in Canada.
Okay, and Brian.
Thanks, Alan. Brian McCauley, I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of Concert Properties. We're a Canadian pension fund-owned company based in Vancouver and here active in Toronto as well. Been in existence for over 24 years. We're owned by 19 Canadian pension plans. We're active in all facets of real estate, really for sale, condominiums, rental, residential, industrial and commercial, seniors lifestyle communities, and we have a single hotel in Victoria, which is not really part of our core asset class. We've developed over 10,000 housing units, a mixture of for sale and rental in the past. And here in Toronto, we've been most active on building rental residential over the last 10 years. By August of this year, we'll have completed 2,400 new purpose-built rental residential units here in Toronto. So what do we have under construction today? We have 950 rental units under construction today. We're converting a hotel in Victoria, a 3-star hotel, which was a 146-room hotel, into 126 rental units in Victoria. We're doing 174 rental units at the University of British Columbia right now in Vancouver, and we're under construction in downtown Toronto with 2 projects, one of which is 463 units at Bay and Dundas, and the other at 177 units at Queen and Berkeley. So we are active in those locations. We're really focused primarily in British Columbia and here in Ontario is our focus.
Okay, thank you. We do have a bit of a Toronto focus today, so I take a look at the city of Markham, 170,000 people, one of the highest incomes. There's only 2,000 rentals there. I'm sure if John looked at the market and say 2,000 rentals in a very high income marketplace, how come nobody's building rentals? So the question I have for each of you gentlemen is suburban rentals, there seems to be huge gaps, especially in the affluent 905 communities in Ontario, and I'm sure similar outside of Ontario. I can only talk to the markets here. How come nobody's looking or nobody's building a suburban?
Well, certainly what we're looking at is not suburban for the most part, although I'd say it's urban and then transit-oriented suburban. So certainly in Vancouver on the SkyTrain, we'd be all over a number of those locations. I don't know, I look around and I see the 168 cranes around Toronto as well, and I drive around some of the neighborhoods, and I don't see anything compelling about some of the buildings being built. I understand the ones on the subway lines, I understand the ones downtown and the reason for them to be there. And I think the risk with what you have to do if you're going to build a purpose-built rental and own it is what's the rent today and how's it going to grow, and is it going to grow, because you're starting at $2.50, $3, whatever you're starting at. So the asset to me has to be compelling, and an average asset in an average location in the suburbs, there's nothing compelling for me there, notwithstanding the demographics. Now, if it's right at a GO station, maybe that gets me a little bit more excited.
Okay, great. Ryan?
Yeah, that's probably more of a question for our clients than, excuse me, than for me. But we basically design and build all sorts of accommodation projects, extended stay, nursing homes, etc. And we find that we're most active in suburban municipalities in that market, and generally in the low to medium rise, 4 stories to 6 stories. But we've seen a lot of action in what I'll call secondary markets in the last few years, Northern Ontario being one. We currently have a project we're looking at in Kirkland Lake, which is conversion of an office building, the former federal government office building, to rental accommodation for the gold mine workforce there. So that's kind of been our experience, that we are doing quite a bit of work in the suburban and northern communities, but not really anything significant in downtown areas.
Right.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. We have done historically a number of low-rise wood frame projects in the past, but I think the reality from our perspective is that given the cost of construction today and given the market demands for being in an urban location, in a high-density transit-oriented location, that's really where we've focused. So we haven't seen as compelling a business case to go to a suburban location, and we still feel we can compete in many instances, although it's difficult. More and more difficult, certainly in Vancouver, and becoming more and more difficult here in Toronto to compete on a pure urban site, but we think that's where the demand is.
Okay.
Alan, I'm perplexed by these answers.
I'm taking them because I know it's their perspective.
Yeah. I mean, you know, in Markham, you can get almost Toronto rents. Now, you're involved in the building there. You know, you can get $225, $230, $240 per foot in Markham. We have a building for sale in Ancaster right now. We're getting $225 a square foot, right? And I think that these deals pencil out better because you're building them, you know, high-density wood, you know, 4-story hydraulic elevator, something like that, some underground parking, some surface parking. There aren't the investor condos in those markets, so people who are buying condos are actually using them. So you don't have that additional competition coming from the shadow market. You got strong job growth, and it's higher income job growth for Markham, where there's a lot of technology companies. Average income Motorola is $100,000 per year. I just think that, you know, it's our culture, right? We're concrete, high-rise, downtown guys. And
but I think there's a reason for that. Like, I don't know that everybody, we look at it, we own a bunch of wood. construction. And we bought brand new in the Maritimes
Right.
9 or 10 years ago, and convinced ourselves through that piece that there was no incremental cost in the first 8 or 10 years. But we saw the capital mounting quickly and sold the asset. And I think long term, and that's what we are as a long-term investor in real estate, we can't convince ourselves that wood is a better alternative. I see it as a different product. It's
Sure.
cheaper, the rent may be cheaper, but there are deals in Vancouver where guys are trying to build stick on $100 and $120 a buildable land because they can't make the concrete work. The land price is wrong, right? Like it's not even starting in the right place. So you may see the math as better, but long term, what does that asset do? This is the worst. This is yield wise. The multifamily is not the best performing asset class in Canada. It's actually done extremely well in the US. It's the most challenging in Canada. It's the lowest yielding asset class from 2000 to 2012 as we look at it. Lowest or tied for lowest with industrial. Office and retail has done better. So what are you going to do to make it compelling for me? And so one of those things is the long-term sustainable, diversified characteristics.
That's a really good answer.
I think the only thing I would add to that, Derek, is that you can't be everything to everybody in every location.
Yes.
And the reality is we've chosen to focus geographically and by asset class in the areas that we know we can actually build, bring together a qualified team, and we understand the political dynamics and we understand the approval process, and we can actually deliver in that environment. We can't stretch our human resources thinly across the country and be effective.
As the moderator, can I jump in as well?
You bet.
I think the beautiful thing what's going on in the States is it's a real industry. You have all different types of developers doing all different types of products, very, very competitive market, and pretty decent returns. I know I looked at it when I was at Minto. We kept on studying the Markham and the Stouffville's and the different markets. We did build 500 townhomes and stacked townhomes in Ottawa. I'm glad we did because we got great appreciation and a pretty decent return through the process. So I would say that and it's a different perspective than Paul or Brian would have, but when you're taking a look today, things are slowing down in the suburbs. You've got a machine that's ready to roll out some rental product that you're going to keep for 5, 10, or 15 years, and then you sell it as a resale unit. Obviously, timing comes in, whether you sell it at 7 years or 12 years, depends on the marketplace. But if you do have a little bit different perspective, and that is to actually cash in on your investment and cash in on some of the upside from the condominium process of those townhomes or stacked townhomes or 4 stories, I think it would add a little bit different perspective.
Yeah, I think if Canada was like the US, we'd have lots of institutions investing in the suburbs. In the US IPD, it's, 20, 23% apartment in their index. That's the holding of the average pension fund. It's 4, 5, 6% in Canada because the big guys don't own any. So if you don't have to hunt as hard for the product, you don't have to go to those places. If, as I anticipate an increase in pension fund participation in the asset class, you may find that we start looking for those alternatives and different opportunities. But we're all just looking to sprinkle it into our portfolios right now. It's when we go in there in a big way and look to place billions, not hundreds of millions, that you'll see more.
Okay, so Paul, you're about to pull the plug on a couple deals or to hit the start switch. So what type of returns are you looking for? Huge returns.
No.
And let me just start. So you are the developer, so you bought rezoned land, or did you have to rezone it? Or
Depends on the site. In Calgary, it's zone ready to go, and you can debate density, but Calgary, as the previous presenter from the city described, is pretty open and encouraging to development, which if any other cities want to get it going, they should adopt that same approach.
So what type of returns are you looking for?
I think it doesn't matter what asset class, whether it's developing an office building or a residential building. to develop on an unlevered IRR after fee, which is how we look at our business after asset management fee, we'd like to get a 200 basis point premium. Reality is we haven't got that since about 2003, 4, 5. 150, and arguably in this asset class it may just be over 100. But I get best in class, I have likely lead product, I have no capital for the next little while, and most importantly, I lease up, so I put the tenants in that I want, not the tenants in that a merchant builder jammed in order to sell the building. So maybe it's actually really more than 100 because I don't have some of the other issues that are going to arise out of the purchase.
So we're at all-time low interest rates today and all-time low cap rates. You get 100, 150 basis point push over the next 2-3 years, which I'm not saying is going to happen, but I'm not saying it's not going to happen. You could be building at cost or even having a value less than cost if you're going to run Calgary at 100 basis points and cap rates go up 150. How do you protect yourself?
The way the pension funds do it anyways, which I think is the right way to look at real estate, is they look at it on an unlevered IRR basis. So you use leverage as a strategic weapon, if you will. You use it selectively to enhance your yields, but it needs to make sense unlevered. And that running return that you get, the year over year just running return that you get, needs to be satisfactory to you as it is, regardless of what happens to value. So if you're going to be a market timer, which some of our competitors are, then market time and don't buy in 2012-13, because that's pretty risky. I mean, it's not that it's necessarily at a peak or necessarily going to drop, but the risk is up from 2009-10 when everything was quite cheap. But for most of the pension funds, they're dollar cost averaging. They're trying to get their money invested over time. They're trying to do the best deal they can in the market at the time, and if that unlevered return is adequate, and that's where this asset class struggles, because it's the only reason that the pricing is where it is because of interest rates, particularly in multifamily, every asset class, but particularly multifamily. But we look at that, and then as some of the previous lending guys were talking, we look at strategies of how to lock in that debt early. But yeah, we could take a capital hit, but we're not short-term investors. We're not a merchant builder that needs to exit at a 4 or a 5 or a 6 in 36 or 48 months. We're there for a decade or more.
Okay, thank you.
So similar to Paul, I mean, we're a long-term investor. Our pension funds are looking at holding everything we can build, and so we're certainly taking that long-term horizon on it. I think we're doing it both on an unlevered cash basis in certain situations, but more often than not today, taking advantage of where the financing rates are, looking at the pros and cons of whether CMHC insured financing makes sense, doing the combined deals between construction financing and takeout financing in today's environment. And I think the key for us is taking advantage of long-term money. So we're looking at locking in where we do leverage at 20-year money.
Ryan, anything to add, or this not really yours?
That was a pretty complete answer, so I think I'll pass on that.
So let me just jump on that. Paul, I'm not meaning to pick on you, but you are on my left here.
I'm close. Yeah.
Calgary, there hasn't been a new rental built since GWL built their 2 buildings 8 years ago, 10 years ago. How do you justify the rents that you're going to be able to achieve, that you need to achieve in order to get?
Yeah, whether it's Calgary or any other market, it's not easy in the higher end, say the urban high-rise concrete, figuring out what that rent is going to be. You can use the condo shadow market, as you call it, Dirk, to try to extrapolate where the rents are. There's nowhere near enough rental in Calgary. That's a boom. It's a strange place to invest in multifamily. If you invest in multifamily, first of all, for diversification benefits and to be low risk, because Calgary's anything other than low risk. We had a 10% pop in rents in 12, but 10 and 11, they dropped 10. 5, 6, 7, they pop 20 or 30. I mean, it's quite volatile in rent, and that's tough in spec construction of any asset class. What's the rent going to be in 36 months when I'm ready? We just think that there is nowhere near enough stock there, and have some compelling locations in the Beltline that we think are close enough to downtown to play off of that. And with the oil industry, there is a lot of, transient or temporary workers coming in and out on contract that we think the, $2,000 and $2,500 rent tab is not out of the realm. There's risk, but there's risk on everything. So you bottle it as much as we can. We don't consider the construction much of a risk. We can nail that one down. It also, Calgary's kind of neat in that unlike Vancouver and Toronto, the condo prices aren't way out of control. And the number of investors in our analysis anyway seems to be a far smaller percentage, maybe 30% investors, 70% users, as opposed to the inverse in Toronto. So I don't have quite as much competition that way, and on a relative basis, not that much is being built. So it's a calculated risk. If I could do it, I would prefer, Vancouver and Toronto are two markets where that echo boom downtown urbanization has happened. You'd love to play, but there's a gazillion condos that we both have to compete with to do that. So Calgary's a different play.
Brian, your thoughts?
We're actually not active in Alberta on the construction side at all. So, and there's a reason for that. I mean, we're owned by a series of pension funds. We build with union labor. In Alberta, that's a challenge. So that keeps us out of the new home residential market in Alberta right
So
now.
what about another new market that you're going into? You talked about a few of them before, so.
In terms of any downtown Vancouver, downtown Toronto, downtown Victoria, whatever, in terms of how do we gauge our pricing?
Well, I think in Toronto there's probably more to gauge because of the
Yep.
shadow market.
Yep.
I would assume Vancouver's pretty similar, that there is a pretty strong shadow market, but
Yep.
let's say Victoria.
Victoria is a really good example. Victoria is a very flat residential condominium market, and there are very few investors in that marketplace, and frankly, there's no urgency. So we have a 157-unit condominium project in Victoria under construction with only 30% pre-sales. So we know that there are not a lot of investors taking flyers in that marketplace. But again, there's a stable stock of rental residential that you can gauge yourself against in any marketplace. And the question is, in Victoria, we've got a very unique offering because we're converting an existing hotel into a rental apartment building. So it's not a purpose-built, brand new, state-of-the-art, LEED Gold, highly sustainable building. We're doing a retrofit there. So we've been trying to gauge where we sit relative to the rental apartment market and work backwards from what is an affordable rent as to what we can put in terms of capital expenditure in order to make that project work. So a bit of a different animal.
Okay. Brian Chamberlain, I'm not ignoring you, so the next question is to start with you. Green. Talk about green. What are you seeing today in green? Is it a passing fad, or is it something that your clients are really seriously interested in?
Well, I think there's a couple things to remember about green or sustainable design. And that is, everybody talks about LEED as if it was sustainable, but LEED is just a system of charting what you did on a particular job in terms of certain incentives that they mark you on. And one of those issues is, for example, if the products or materials that you use in your building come within 500 miles of the site, you get X number of points. Now, if you're building in Inuvik, there's nothing within 500 miles of your site, so you don't get those points. You get points, for example, having a bicycle rack. And obviously in some areas that's not a very practical thing to do, and therefore you lose those points. So you have to really understand who's rating you and what their scores are for. I think though and sustainability is kind of an interesting topic in that there's really two reasons that you do that. One is for bragging rights. And we find this in most municipalities these days. There's rarely an RFP that comes out that doesn't say they're going to be certified to silver or gold LEED standards. And that's part of their good corporate citizen issue, if I could call it that. And to me, depending on who you are, that might have some benefit for a corporation or a municipality. But the real long-term save the planet benefits of sustainable design are in the long-term benefits and operating costs. And you have to remember that the operating costs of a building far exceed the capital or first-time costs in a building. So a lot of people think of sustainability just as energy conservation, and certainly it includes that, but that's not the only topic. But I really think that the tipping point has been reached on sustainability. I don't think we're having that conversation anymore, that argument. I think it's here to stay. And it's interesting, if you look in some of the trade magazines, the ads for suppliers of building materials will have they'll have their ad, but at the bottom they'll say, if you use our product, you get 10 LEED points. So it's getting easier and easier to design a LEED certified or a sustainable building, because all the suppliers and manufacturers are doing the work for you because they see it as a good marketing incentive for their product.
Paul, what are you doing in your buildings?
Well, I guess a couple comments. One, I don't know why anyone would build a new building that wasn't LEED or shadow LEED efficient, particularly when it's going to go straight to rent, given that the units are metered. The tenants are going to pay for that for the most part. What was interesting is our portfolio managers tell us they have gone repeatedly to older existing buildings to talk about LEED type upgrades, going for LEED EB, here's what we can do, and if there's anything related to a cost that comes back to the tenants, they have no interest. So it suggests to me there's going to be a wider and wider chasm between old and new. That's not great for the province as a whole, but at least the new stuff is going to address it. I think, I hope that it's more than just energy efficiency and sort of the right thing to do, but that it's a marketing tool. And in particular in the US, where there is a larger echo boom cohort than there is in Canada, more dominant echo boom cohort, where we're building in the downtown locations. In Seattle, we're building right beside the Gates Foundation, and got lucky that after we started, Amazon's going to put 1 million feet right across the street from us. But the people that are working in those buildings, they care about green. They won't go where green isn't. And so if that's the 25 to 39 or 20 to 40 cohort, which is much of what the CBD markets are targeting, I don't think you can ignore it. I think if you're good at it, you can leverage that and market the heck out of it as more than just the right thing to do, but
yeah, and
actual marketing advantage.
I think it's very much a marketing issue that, for example, if you happen to hold a portfolio of office buildings and you hope to rent to large corporations, either out of Canada or the US, they're not even going to talk to you unless you have some sort of certification in the sustainable or LEED environment.
Brian?
Yeah, we're really not a huge LEED fan, but we recognize, as Brian and Paul have said, that the LEED format is an off-the-shelf, easy-to-use checklist that most municipalities or provincial governments are now implementing. We're doing it for many of the reasons that Brian and Paul have said. I mean, we're long-term holders. We're most concerned about the life cycle cost of the materials in the building and the operations over the life of the building itself. We're certainly building all of our buildings today to LEED standards to meet requirements that are imposed on us by municipalities. So our last 2 rental buildings are LEED Gold. The next 2 are certainly lined up to get LEED Gold. But in the City of Toronto, Tier 2 green building standards, we're meeting all of those. But our objective as a corporation is actually beyond LEED, and we're looking at what is really the next most important thing in sustainability, and whether that's carbon neutrality or some other form, we're not sure yet, but that's where our heads are at in sustainability.
Brian, what type of money are you spending per building on the incremental to go green?
Tough call. It's, I remember sitting in these seminars with LEED people saying, it doesn't cost you anything more to build green buildings, which is quite frankly wrong. But what is the incremental increase to what we do in building the right things, whether it's variable speed drives and all of the other things we put into our buildings? There's probably, give or take, a 4 to 5% increase in cost on doing the right thing and making the right decisions for the long term.
I'll just give one example. Our building at Minto, Roehampton, which we went LEED Gold, and I happen to agree, LEED is just a marketing label. The real issue is reduction in consumption and empowering the tenants to consume even less. So we reduced water 52%, natural gas 39%, electricity 33%. This was a building we finished probably in 2008, a little 150 suiter. At the time, if I didn't have those savings and the cost savings formula, there's no way that building would have got built as a rental. We're thrilled that we were able to find those savings by eliminating waste. And so it's certainly something as the moderator but as an industry player, to build a building today that's obsolete, it's just, the way I word it, it's a crime against our children, trying to make, and we do have an obligation as the builders of the future cities to build more efficient buildings. I guess just one last question. I'm going to look to Brian first. What do you see changing in construction techniques, methodologies? What do you see on the horizon that's going to make a more efficient construction industry?
I think that there's two things there that are changing. One is methods, and the other is contractual issues. And in terms of methods, we see more and more system building. We're doing a extended stay project in Thunder Bay right now using structural steel studs. And that entire building was manufactured in a factory, brought to the site and bolted together. And as I think Thunder Bay probably had a couple of feet of snow in May this year, or maybe it was April. But you know, we live in a northern climate, and the more you can take off the site and treat your site just like a Ford plant assembly line, the better off you are. Mattamy Homes did a very interesting house building program where they had a large tract of residential land and attached it with some industrial. And what they did is they actually built a home factory on the industrial. They built all their homes inside summer, winter, spring, fall, and then they actually moved them outside onto the foundations that have been prepared. Very, very creative. There's a lot of inspection issues that have to come with that. How do you certify the electrical that was done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we see that move towards that type of systems building, or really the future. The other thing is, I don't know how many of you here are familiar with building information modeling, or BIM. Basically, for simplicity's sake, it's a three-dimensional drafting system that is replacing AutoCAD. And we've been using that system for 5 years now. And it's quite amazing that the data that comes out of that system that saves marketing, shortens approvals. You now have a system where we can walk the clients through the building, fly them through so they can actually see what it is that they're building, because not all people can understand a two-dimensional drawing. When it comes to the approval process, which is probably the most significant issue we have in Ontario and Canada today, in terms of the delays to project realization, you can actually show the community and the stakeholders exactly what it is they're getting. We're actually in our construction division using BIM, moving to eliminate the fear factor from trades. And what I mean by that is we're moving to a system where we'll guarantee them the quantities. All they have to worry about is how long it takes them to put the drywall on the wall. And that's all possible through the takeoff that you can get out of a BIM information model. We're not yet there in Ontario, but in terms of computer-aided manufacturing, we're at the point right now where we're starting to eliminate shop drawings and that whole process that takes a long time to turn around and is never done fast enough, such that our drawings in effect are the shop drawings, and we can submit those directly to the computer-aided manufacturer. And if it happens to be the guy making the ducts, for example, in an HVAC system, the old method was he shipped a bunch of sizes and lengths out to the site, and the tin banger came in and started chopping and cutting and hammering and putting it together, and 20% of it got thrown in the garbage. With properly used BIM and computer-aided manufacturing, you can take waste to zero, which again comes back to the whole green initiative that we're talking about, because green is not just in the concept and operation. It has to do, if you want to get LEED certified on your construction site, you have to go through very rigid controls over how much waste you generate, et cetera. So we see that as a very, very exciting move into the future that's going to save us all a ton of money. I don't want to take up the whole mic time here, but the other thing we see is in terms of contractual situations, is that in the future, and we've been doing this now for about 20 years, and it's been a tough sell, but we're moving from adversarial contracts between owners and architects and owners and contractors, and we're moving towards, in fact, this is pretty well all we do. We used to be general contractors, but we're not anymore, because what we do is integrate the design and construction under what's called an IPD process. And that process is a collaborative process where right at the beginning you bring the owner, the architect, the builder, and in some cases tertiary people, engineering and major subtrades such as mechanical, electrical together, and as a team you realize a successful project.
Was that the case, you're building in Halifax today? Was that the case there?
Yes. No. It started out to be, but...
You're in court fighting.
Well, no, we're not in court. It's just that the owner, the trouble with the collaborative approach, and I've given presentations to the federal government on this, to DCC and to Public Works, and their first question is always, well, how do I handle my risk? How do I control my risk? And it's and they look at risk as being solved by a bond with the general contractor and professional liability insurance from a consultant. And my answer is, well, have you ever called a bond? Have you ever called on professional liability insurance? You just bought yourself a 5-year legal battle. That's not the answer, and it's not insurance, it's a bond. So we have a hard time. So the project you're referring to, we started off in that method, but then the client decided that they couldn't handle the risk factor and changed it
Okay.
to a different method.
Paul O'Brien, you want to jump in on this question? Or?
Just a couple comments. First of all, it's good to hear Brian talk about BIM, and I think the extension of BIM is actually in the apartment business is what you can use that base information for in terms of managing your asset on a go-forward basis. All of that information is generated from the start. You can then put it into your digital control system. Everything can link in to the original building design. So I think if we go there and get there as an industry, that would be fabulous. But the construction industry is notoriously slow on innovation. It's probably the least innovative industry that we have out there. So you know, the move towards pre-manufacturing and everything else I think is great. It's just incredibly slow in happening. And I'd love to see it happen faster, but I'm not sure that wave is going to hit us soon.
Paul? Okay. All right, well, gentlemen, thank you very much. Best of luck with the projects you have on the go. I hope you, as well, a lot in the crowd, start developing more rentals. We need them here in Canada. And thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.